the most moral military in the world continues to target aid workers. It's actually now the most dangerous place for aid workers. I don't know exactly how you could be the most moral military in the world if you're also the most dangerous for aid workers. You keep killing aid workers. But here is the story. Let me just go ahead and pull this up for you guys. Sorry, I'm on my own today. My producer is sick, and I run on such a, for a show, I run on very, very little. Most shows have like 5, 6, 7. Some of them have 10, 14 people. And I run a skeleton crew, and my one guy is out sick today. So I'm on my own. So you guys will just have to forgive me if there's a bunch of mistakes here today, okay? But I'm doing my absolute best, running everything and getting everything ready for the show tonight. But let's go ahead and get started here. So this story came out from Al Jazeera. At least 8 killed in an Israeli airstrike on UNRWA aid center in Gaza. Here's the story from Al Jazeera. At least 8 people have been killed. This was an aid center that was the main headquarters of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Gaza Strip. So this was the main one, and here they are targeting it. Now, don't tell me that they targeted it accidentally, or that, well, whoops, it just so happened that our bomb dropped right near there. When the Israelis have been saying over and over and over for some time now that they've been labeling the UNRWA as a terrorist organization. They've been trying to get it labeled, saying, well, they employ the people that work for them are terrorists. They are also Hamas, and so they're running cover for Hamas, and so they themselves are Hamas. Everything is Hamas, right? So they've been labeling this organization, and now they've suddenly hit this organization. The airstrike on Sunday hit the main gate of the organization's compound in Gaza City, in north of the enclave, injuring multiple Palestinians. The facility is used to distribute the little humanitarian aid that gets into Gaza. Hundreds of people displaced by the Israeli military's ground invasion of Gaza were sheltering inside the facility at the time of the incident. Quote, some people were coming to receive coupons, and others had been displaced from their houses, and they were sheltering here. Some were filling up water, others were receiving coupons, and suddenly we heard something falling. We ran away. Those who were carrying water let it spill, said Mohammed Tafesh, one of the witnesses. Commenting on the attack, the Israeli military said that the building was a shield for terrorist activities and had been used by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Sure. That is always the excuse every single time. That is 100% always their excuse, is that, well, Hamas was there. They had tunnels there. They had people there. What are we going to do? You know, it's Hamas. All right, here is another one for you. Let's see. This one is from the New York Times. Gaza is the world's deadliest place for aid workers. This one says, Gaza has become the most dangerous place in the world for aid workers. The United Nations said on Monday, at least 250 aid workers have been killed since the war there began on October 7th. The United Nations has said, and on Monday, the UN said that nearly 200 of them worked for UNRWA, its main agency for Palestinian refugees, further hindering the work of organizations already struggling to deliver aid to the enclave. Aid groups have said most of the dangers come from Israeli bombardment and airstrikes, which have devastated Gaza over 8 months of war, killing more than 37,000 Gazans, according to local health authorities. Israel launched its retaliatory campaign in Gaza after the Hamas-led assault in southern Israel killed about 1,200 people and abducted about 240, right? So we know this. It is unclear how many aid workers have been killed by Israel's offensive while delivering humanitarian aid, though at least some of the 193 UNRWA employees were, said Inez Hamdan, UNRWA's acting public information officer for Gaza. Airstrikes or bombardment never stops, Ms. Hamdan said. She added, in order for humanitarian response to be effective, stable conditions are needed. So it is now the single most dangerous place. The most moral military in the world is the most dangerous for aid workers in the world as well. And now the UN has announced that they might have to halt operations altogether in Gaza. They've informed the Israeli military, the most moral military in the world. They informed them just Monday that they might have to halt the the operations altogether. All right, here we go. Sorry, let me just move this here so I can see what I'm pulling up for you guys. Okay. Now look at this. It's not just the UNRWA. It is other organizations now as well. So now they're going after Doctors Without Borders. So they first said, oh, the UN is filled with terrorists. They're Hamas, they're Hamas, they're Hamas. But now they're saying Doctors Without Borders are Hamas as well. This is the post from MSF International, which is Doctors Without Borders. They said, we are outraged and strongly condemn the killing of our colleague Fadi al-Wadia in an attack this morning in Gaza City. The attack killed Fadi along with 5 other people, including 3 children, while he was cycling to work near the MSF clinic where he was providing care. Well, the IDF then responds to this, and this is what they said. They said, always check to see who you're hiring. Your colleague, Fadi al-Wadia, was a significant terrorist in Islamic Jihad. He advanced the terrorist organization's rocket array, also known as a way to endanger the lives of civilians. He is just another case of terrorists in Gaza exploiting the civilian population as human shields. So now they're going after Doctors Without Borders. So just wait for it, right? They're going to start off by saying this one guy, this is how they did it with the UNRWA. And then they say, oh, no, now it's many of you. Turns out a lot of you are the terrorists that are working for Hamas. Turns out so many more of you. The thing about that is, you know, Hamas, the Palestinians aren't allowed an actual military. This is also one of those mind tricks that they do where they're talking about, well, their military targets us. So what are we supposed to do? Their military just needs to stop targeting us. This is a war between militaries. It's actually not. The Palestinians are not allowed a military. So when they say things like, well, they use civilian infrastructure and they hide amongst the civilians, that's because they're actually civilians. This is a sort of a guerrilla force that has come together of civilians. And that is why so many people call it a resistance group, because it actually is. If you're not legally allowed a military. So let's say the federal government bans the right for every state to raise its own National Guard, right? So every state has its own National Guard that is commanded by the governor. Let's say the federal government decided to get rid of that. They say no more, military is federal and federal only. So you're not legally allowed to have this. And the federal government becomes extremely tyrannical and oppressive. I mean, obviously they would be at that point. If they're telling you you're not allowed to have a military, they're probably an oppressive regime, right? So then you raise a military. You're trying to raise one anyway. You're not really allowed to have one, but you're going to raise one because you got to fight back against this tyranny and against this oppression. How are you going to do it? Now, they've got satellites in the sky. They're seeing you everywhere. They've got eyes everywhere. You're not allowed to have any access to the airspace. You can't even have an airport. You don't have access to anything. So they've got all eyes on you, and they've got those eyes from above. So are you going to build a military base? I mean, if you were to build one, what do you think would happen in that situation? Don't you think the federal government would come along and blow it up? I mean, that would be the first thing they would do. They'd say, with their drone, illegal, illegal, that would be it, right? That's what we could all assume. So you would have to hide your activities. You would have to figure out a way to raise this military to fight back against them, and you'd have to do it sight unseen. That is just common sense. That is just what anybody, when you're putting a group of people in a situation where they're not allowed to be armed, they're not allowed to have a military, that is what they're going to do. Now imagine, even if it's not even a military, but imagine if the federal government bans the right to bear arms and says, every American, turn in your guns, you're not allowed to have them. What do you think the vast majority of Americans are going to do in that situation? Because I think they're going to hide their guns. That's what I think they're going to do. I think they're going to take the guns they have. I don't think they're going to turn them in. I think they're going to hide the guns. And where are they going to hide them? Probably under their houses. They're going to hide them. You know, most people don't live on acres and acres of land, so they can't go out in the middle of nowhere and just hide their guns. They're going to hide them in their closets. They're going to hide them in their basements. They're going to hide them in their homes. Would that then justify the federal government coming along and saying, well, we got to blow up your house because you were hiding the guns there. You're clearly raising a military. You're armed and dangerous. We had to do something about this. That's the logic that they're trying to sell us. They're trying to sell us that it's Hamas's fault for embedding themselves amongst civilians. What they don't tell you, what they leave out, what they omit, because they think we're stupid and they think that we'll just gobble up anything without asking a single question. and unfortunately, a lot of times they're right, they are just saying these things to us, saying, well, it's their fault for hiding amongst these civilians and embedding themselves within the civilian population. They shouldn't be doing that. They don't really have any other choice. I mean, if you're going to, the only option is not to raise up a military and not to fight back. And that is, I mean, you could sit there and think, well, that's what they shouldn't fight back then. You know, they should just leave these Israelis alone and let them come and kill their kids and take their land and continue to abuse them, and they continue to be subjugated with absolutely no rights. Now, you might be one that's just still not convinced of that. You might be convinced that, no, they have their rights. They're their own sovereign nation. They're just terrorizing these poor Jews. You might think that, but that is just not the reality of the situation. It just isn't. So you could think it all you want. It's just not real. And so these people, now, they're rising up in the way that they rise up. There are certain times, of course, we could condemn it and say, wow, this was really atrocious. This was really terrible. How could they have done this? Or we could also assume that if you oppress people for many decades, bad stuff is going to happen. They're going to rise up and it's not going to be good. I mean, innocent people will die. There will be harm. It's going to be bad. I mean, I think anybody who thinks logically about this, I mean, I understand that. I understand that if you're a man and you beat the crap out of your wife all the time, one day she might get a gun and kill you. And if she does, she does. I mean, will she go and face court? Yes. Will she maybe be found guilty? Probably. Will she go to jail? I'm sure. But you also should have assumed that if you treat somebody this way, yes, they might have to face their own consequences for that. Fine. You know, nobody's saying they shouldn't. I'm not saying, oh, it's fine. Go ahead and, you know, you can totally off your abusive husband. Sometimes you can, though, and you can actually get away with it if they're abusive and you're defending yourself and, right, self-defense. But other times, will they have a mitigating circumstance to their sentencing? Probably. The woman probably is not going to be, depending on the circumstances, if she could prove that she'd been abused for a really long time, that will come into play in court, and that will be a mitigating circumstance. So that man should have assumed, if he treated his wife that poorly for so long, that she might get aggressive on him at some point. And I don't know if people then turn around and blame the wife and say, wow, what a horrible human being for rising back up and killing the bastard after he beat her all of those years. I don't know if anybody really says that. I mean, maybe people do, but that is, you know, that's the reality of what's happening here. I want to share with you this other story here. This happened just a few days ago. Employees were killed as they were preparing to work on wells that provide water to the city. So this was four different guys were killed. In fact, let me show you who they are. This is the five people were killed. They worked for the municipality. They were there to help rebuild water and restore water to the north. And they ended up getting struck down on Friday, killing 5 people, including 4 workers, caused significant destruction of a municipality. The civil defense teams are searching for bodies in the rubble after the Gaza municipality garage was destroyed in a strike as employees were preparing to begin work on wells to supply water to locals. The strike on the building on Al-Wahada Street in the center of the city was not the first time the municipality had been targeted by Israeli bombardment. The municipality is responsible for services such as rubbish removal, supplying clean water, and repairing sewers. So they don't want the restoration of water. They don't want any of this being rebuilt in the north because they don't want the Palestinians coming back to the north. So what did they do? They ended up killing these men that were trying to restore water. Water, you have to have water. You will die without the water. This just reminds me of a story. When I went to the West Bank and I came back, I was pretty shocked by what I had seen. I'd mentioned on my Facebook page that I was shocked by what I had seen. And I had a friend reach out to me who grew up in a Zionist family, so very much believed in the literal gathering of Israel with needing Jews to go back to Jerusalem in order for Jesus to come back. So Christian Zionist. And he told me that, and he's an engineer, and he works on water infrastructure. And he told me that he went over there. He believed everything that the Israelis had ever told him. He'd spent a long time in Israel, studied in Israel, loved Israel, and believed everything that the Israelis told them about the Palestinians. But he was working for a humanitarian organization. They were restoring water. And so they went to the West Bank in order to build water infrastructure. And he said that while he was there trying to build water infrastructure, he came across roadblock after roadblock after roadblock with the Israeli government. That the Israeli government, that the Palestinians would select the site that they wanted on their land in the West Bank for their water infrastructure. They would have to go to the Israelis to get permission to do it. The Israelis would then drag their feet, take forever. Finally, the Israelis, after months and months and months, would say, all right, fine, yeah, you can build your infrastructure on that site. Then they would have to draw up plans and get all of those approved. And again, the Israelis would drag their feet and drag their feet and drag their feet on the plans for the actual water infrastructure. So they selected the site, and then they had to develop the infrastructure and draw up the drawings. And these processes, he said, when he worked on the Israeli side, would take days, just a week or two in order to get the approval. But for the Palestinians, it would take months and months and months and months. In fact, in total, it took them 3 years to finally even get to the point where they could survey the land. 3 years. And by the time they got to the point where they could survey the land, the engineer teams, mostly Palestinians, would go out there to start the surveying so that they could build the water infrastructure. And when they would go out there to survey, the IDF would shoot at them. And my friend said, who I grew up with, he says he was in absolute shock. These were just engineers, totally unarmed. They were given permission by that point to be there. The Israelis knew they were going to be there, and yet they shot at them anyway. And it got so bad, they were not able to build any of the water infrastructure. And that is the reality for the Palestinians over there. It's not just this game. They play this other game where they say, well, it's your fault for not building infrastructure. They say this about Gaza all the time. It's your fault for not building the Dubai. You could have had a Dubai, but you didn't. No, they couldn't, because they have to get all the approvals from Israel. From Israel. Israel won't let them have it. Israel certainly won't let them have the materials to then build. They're denied everything. And then when they're denied everything and they don't do it because they're denied everything, the Israelis come along and blame them and say, well, it's not our fault. It's your fault. You should have built something. I don't know. I mean, it's just a mind game. It's just a total mind game. They're playing mind games with you, with me, with the Palestinians, with everybody. And it's time for all of us to wake up to this mind game that they're playing. It's disgusting. This is a terrible regime. I mean, it's genuinely horrific what is going on. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen show. That's right, this is just a clip. If you want the full show, you can go to KimIversonShow.com and you can watch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for about 1 hour. It's totally free. Check it out, KimIversonShow.com. Thanks for watching.